Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week we begin a series of horror movies available on Netflix streaming by looking at the long-awaited Dracula 3D, also known as Dario Argento's Dracula. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, writer of the Ben 10 comic series from IDW. With me from Austin is Drew Edwards, writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man, now from Monsterverse Comics, and a contributing writer to Rockabilly Online and Monsterverse's Tales from the Grave. Say hello, Mr. Drew.
Hello, Mr. Drew.
Hello. Also in Austin, Tony Salvaggio, writer of the Victorian mech comic Clockworks from Humanoids, and Psycom, the manga from Right Stuff and Tokyopop, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
And finally, also in Denver with color commentary, as always, host of the mom-oriented podcast Pod Moms, attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. Dracula 3D, which we'll call it that, whatever you want to call it. Dracula 3D is a 2012 Italian, French, Spanish horror films with no less than 4 screenwriters. Directed.
Why didn't you just say Eurotrash?
Yes. Oh, I wish this were as good as Eurotrash. Okay. Yeah. There are 4 screenwriters, 2012 Italian, French, Spanish horror film directed by Dario Argento, starring Thomas Kretschmann and Rutger Hauer. The screenplay was written by Argento, Enrico Cereso, Stefano Piani, and Antonio Tentori. It is Argento's first 3D film. The film is not a direct adaptation, so says Wikipedia, of the novel Dracula, but features elements from the novel. I'm not even sure why that was worth knowing. I'd say it's more of an homage to other Dracula films, maybe a failed one. Drew will tell us more about that. Okay, let's get first impressions. We have all been dying to talk about this movie. We all have Netflix streaming. It was the moment we saw it was available, we were like, we've got to talk about this movie, though none of us had seen it. So let's get our first impressions. Keep them short so we can get into it. Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll go. Tony, first impressions, Argento's Dracula.
I'd written a lot of things, but in retrospect, I can sum it up. If it worked like Dracula, where you could kill Dracula and all of the other vampires would be healed, if I could keep people from having to endure this movie, I would have driven a stake through my TV last night. I would have sacrificed my TV. I would have driven a stake right through it to prevent other people from having to endure this terrible, feels like 8 hours in 2 hours movie. Like, I can't remember the last movie I checked my watch and then looked in horror. That was the horror of this movie. The horror
Tony,
was
I wish that you would be more forthcoming with your opinions. I really do.
The horror was every time it seemed like I'd only seen 5 more minutes of this, and I couldn't believe it.
You know what, I'm not even going to respond to that because I know we have our own first impressions. So, all right. So Tony would have destroyed his television if he thought that it would have done the world good in getting rid of this film. Julia, how do we bat this time? Give me your first impression.
Worst movie ever, to quote the comic book guy from The Simpsons. Badly quote him. This was torture. It was torture to watch. It was torture, just torture. That's all.
Torture. Okay. Drew, your thoughts?
When I first read about this movie in, I think it was Fangoria, I was excited about this movie. That's the thing that really, really just kind of makes me sick. And but it's not just that it's a bad movie, which it is. It's a really bad movie. It's not bad in the right way. It's like if it had just been a little bit trashier or a little bit goofier, then at least it could have been entertaining bad. But what this movie is more than anything, the thing that makes it painful, at least to me, is how bland. It's just so, it's like, it's one thing, like we all love old vampire movies.
Yes.
On this podcast. I mean, we've done more than our fair share of all kinds of vampire movies. This movie is so hung up on vampire cliches that it just, like, bland.
It's like somebody made a bet and we all lost. Like somebody made a bad bet and everyone involved who has watched it or is involved at all lost.
And gory. See, that's what you're saying, bland, but I'm thinking if it was bland,
it's not
it would be
gory
so gory.
enough.
It's
If it
gory,
had
but
been
it could be
gory, if it had
gory.
been gorier, it would have been.
No.
It would have been more entertaining. Like it would have been
okay,
something.
that's the problem, and this is my first impression. When I think about Argento, and when I think about Eurotrash, I'm going to keep this short because we're going to get right into talking about Euro horror. But when I think about Argento and those guys, I think grainy, exploitative, grungy movies with practical sets filmed in big fallen down castles with torches and guys with wraparound shades and lots of naked women and just smarmy scripts that just sort of string together barely. And, Suspiria is a good example. And those are some trashy movies. But they are eminently watchable because they're clever and there's just sort of a magic to how grungy they are. This is not that. This is like a poorly made community theater version of Dracula with nudity and some gore thrown in. But it is more brightly lit than an episode of Bonanza. It's in 3D for no reason that I can perceive, and they have to
show off those amazing special effects.
Yes,
and aren't they amazing?
And there are no practical sets unless some of these courtyard kind of things are. This is the. I don't know. I was watching this and going. I just feel extraordinarily sad to be watching this. So, but Asia Argento's cute, so it's got that going for it.
And I thought the guy who played Dracula was pretty hot.
Right.
I actually did not I'll get more into this when we start talking about the cast. The guy that plays Dracula, I actually did not mind him, but unfortunately everything else around him was so bad. He was trying.
Oh, absolutely. And we might even say that he elevates the material, but he does not. There's no the material cannot be elevated. That's the hilarious thing, is that this is a movie that is ostensibly based on Dracula, and it's actually closer than the book Dracula, closer to it than a lot of other things we've seen, and yet, look how many screenwriters it takes to bore the shit out of 4 of us, okay? that is astonishing to me. Okay, but let's go back to first of all, let's talk about Dario Argento. And the question of, are we more upset about this because it's from a person that we all acknowledge to be a master?
I think maybe. And here's the thing, did somebody punk Argento and tell him, oh, well, if you're going to film in 3D, you have to take the saturation. If you have the HSV slider, you have to slide the saturation all the way to the right.
Yeah, what Tony's referring to is there's no color correction on this thing at all. There's no.
No, it's color corrected. It's just that somebody took the saturation and just made it into Candyland. It looks like Willy Wonka, not the old Willy Wonka. It looks like the new Willy Wonka plus
so
lighting.
Cheap looking. It looks like a fan film.
No, here's the other thing. Right now, and I'm sorry for anyone who had to see this movie because they wanted to discuss it with us. I feel so bad for you. Right now, don't watch this. There's hundreds upon hundreds of student films, vampire films you could watch on YouTube right now that are better than this movie, and that's the shame of it. Because Argento can make things. Like I said, it's like someone did. I have no idea because I still hold to the fact that no one sets out to make a bad movie. At least Roma knows what they're doing when they make a good bad movie or bad good movie, however you want to call it. This is awful in all kinds of ways.
This is absolutely not intended to be campy. I don't get
it made for a couple of grand.
If it had been campier, it would have been more entertaining. But here's the thing. You talk about the fact that Argento's involved. If this had just been a Sci-Fi Channel original movie, I might have watched it, and no, I don't think I would be nearly as awestruck at how bad it is. Because Argento is a brand name, and I'm not a devotee to him the way a lot of people are.
I think it's fair to say that I'm a devotee of Argento. I haven't seen all of his pictures, but I am one of those people who will go to bat for him every time, and go, oh, we got to see this. It has that name on it.
He's a brand.
Yes. And for those people who haven't seen, so first, to talk about Argento very briefly, Suspiria, all right, is probably the movie that he's, I don't know, that people respect the most out of all the Argento pieces. You know, wasn't he a director also on Dawn of the Dead, the original Dawn of the Dead?
He was a producer, and he was involved in a lot of other ways.
So he was involved in Dawn of the Dead, but he was a big creative force behind it. And then over in Italy, he started making grungy Euro horror. And a lot of times, Argento was one of these guys who would make really interesting films, and he could get American actors to come and be in them and give them some weight. And so Jessica Harper, who was also in Phantom of the Paradise and other stuff like that, was in, and Elizabeth Barrett, I believe the woman who was in Dark Shadows, they were the stars of Suspiria. And that movie about a dance school that is being invaded by witches is just dreamlike and amazing, and also quite gory, but there's just something amazing about it. And he made Opera, which is a thriller that takes place during the filming of Verdi's Macbeth, and he made a new Phantom of the Opera a few years ago, which I haven't seen. But, you know, this is a guy who has done a lot of really artistic stuff, and that people swear by him. I think partially, though, it's because he's part of this school. You know, you think of Argento and Bava and Leone and all these other, like, new wave Italians. It's almost as though he didn't direct this at all, you know, which is possible, I suppose. You know, Argento's 72 years old. Maybe he just handed it off to somebody else and said, "Go make a movie."
His daughter, who's in it.
Asia Argento is probably a better director than
I would say, if judging by the quality that you know in the credits. I'm watching the credits and I'm going, there's no way all these people got paid. Look, where did that budget go?
Well, speaking of the credits, it opens.
But if there's interns in the credits, and I wonder if he just handed it to interns. Like I said, there's student films that are more well shot with better CG than this movie. Like Buffy was a while back. If your like death animation of your vampires is not better than Buffy right now.
But you know what, though? I'll bet
I
have the feeling, watching this, that they were very proud of their effects because they did some really unusual things. Like, there was this one point when somebody gets killed. It's the guy that Dracula forces him to shoot himself in the jaw.
Yes.
And it does this bizarro effect where, like, it's like the bullet kind of went slow motion through his head so that his, like, mouth filled with blood first and then it shot through his brain. It was the grossest thing, but it was very different from anything I'd ever seen before.
Well, actually,
so I think they're actually really quite proud of it.
That one scene where he kind of takes apart the town council, to me, was the one maybe redeemable scene in the whole movie.
Well, you know what I was thinking about that?
It's actually kind of tense, and again, the guy that's playing Dracula is actually, to me, a solid Dracula. You know, in a
I like him a lot.
We should mention him. Let's get straight to that Dracula. So this guy, I don't know this actor playing Dracula, but Drew, you mentioned that he's also
he's Van Helsing on the Dracula TV show. So he went from playing Dracula to Van Helsing, which is interesting to me. It
is.
Which is funny because Van Helsing, Rutger Hauer played Dracula.
He's awesome. Rutger Hauer has played a lot of vampires. He's in the original Buffy. He was in the remake of Salem's Lot, where he was Barlow.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
See that. You know, I saw Return to Salem's Lot a few weeks ago, and I have to say that was a stupendously bad movie. Still much better than Dracula 3D. Absolutely. I totally now have to reevaluate my feelings about the Return to Salem's Lot. But
for this movie, I kept thinking there's this Tim and Eric skit commercial with this thing called Turd, which is a bird and a turtle together, shaped like a frisbee, and you throw it. The whole premise of the commercial is you throw it and it walks back slowly, and they list all these things you can do while Turd is walking back slowly to you. It's like water a fence, do your taxes, stare some more, burn a porn collection. collection. And I just, while watching this, I just kept thinking of that commercial because it felt like that. Like, what else can I do during this movie? I could rearrange my sock drawer. It would be more productive and more fun. Like, I could do any number of things.
I actually did research while I was watching this movie because I was so bored with it, but I just had it playing in the background and I was doing research.
This gentleman playing Dracula, like I mentioned, he is quite good. So in the center of this movie, you have this really fine German actor who is, I believe he's German. If he's not, I apologize. And he plays a blonde Nazi Dracula. You have to understand that this Dracula is sort of, in this one, he's dominating a little town somewhere in Europe. And this Dracula, he's very regal. He wears these high-collared jackets and scarves and everything. And you know, he's very handsome and he's very fit. You know, and there's a twisted malevolence to him that's really great. Having said that, this is going to sound shallow. I hated this guy's hair. I thought, you know, Dracula should not have a side part. I really feel that.
You know what? I'm going to go to bat for the hair because at least it wasn't the long hair that every Dracula's had since Gary Oldman. And I'm a traditionalist. I prefer Dracula to have the slicked back hair. This is a little closer to that. So
I would have been happy if he had long white hair. I would have been happy with you know, I mean, I always thought that the crazy updo that Gary Oldman wears at the beginning of Dracula is crazy absurd, but at least there's something really wild about it. This is just a handsome European actor.
He looks kind of like a young Laurence Olivier to me.
I mean, I guess I can see that. You know,
he would fit well in The Sound of Music.
Yes. No, he is born to play Georg. This is as though the Von Trapp family singers chose to stage Dracula, and Captain Von Trapp had to play Dracula.
Certainly has the same color palette as the Silver Alive song.
But the girls have grown into their bodies a little bit.
Yeah,
that is true.
Yeah.
And how do you make a movie with that much awesome nudity and make it so terrible? That's again another, like, it's wow.
You know what movie I started watching the other day? So I was watching.
You know, wait. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jason, but Tony, the way you make it is by making porn.
I understand to make it terrible.
You said, how do you make a movie with so much nudity and make it so terrible? You make it porn.
But
I'm sure there's a bunch of porn. I'm no expert, but I'm betting that there's a bunch of porn that's way better than this.
Oh, I have a copy of Emmanuel Meets Dracula. Much better movie than Dracula.
We're back to Emmanuel Meets Dracula. How many episodes?
This is actually in this movie.
I mean, Plan 9 from Outer Space is better than this movie.
Highlander 2. Highlander 2, which at the end somebody in the audience yelled out, "There should have been only one." It's better than this movie.
Such a thing is so bad it's good, and I don't know what tips something. You know, there's something intangible that tips something over into that level, but this movie never quite reaches. And I just kept thinking, you know, if it was just a tad bit sleazier or campier, like there's a few moments, like when Dracula turns into a giant mantis, like there's a few moments of like sublime goofiness.
That was interesting.
But they're so far and few. They're so far and few between.
But why?
This is what I'm saying when I say that I think they were pretty proud of themselves.
It's a mantis, but even that, like, the practical effects are crappy, and the CG is crappier. I really think that they thought to themselves, let's do something really different with this Dracula, something that's never been done before. We'll make him into a bunch of flies that come together and form him or whatever. And then we'll make him into a praying mantis or a wolf or whatever, like all these different things.
The basic idea in this movie is that you know, Harker goes to visit Dracula. Dracula terrorizes the town. Oh yeah, let's talk about Harker in a sec. But what makes this Dracula? So it's just like the Hammer Dracula, basically, in many ways, except for that here Dracula has a lot of transformation powers. That's the one innovation of this picture. The rest of it. Every single scene is really just a kind of a restaging of scenes we've seen in other movies, but really kind of unimaginatively. It's not that they like twist it around and make it a little different. They're generally just literally the same scene that you've seen before.
Actually,
with the exception.
To me, the only innovative part was the girl Tanya. They make her actually still around and jealous of like, and Renfield's hers, and that actually I was like, oh, that's kind of neat, but it's just it doesn't even matter though.
True.
It doesn't like none of that part like that would be interesting if somebody made a good movie with that, because then you're like, wow, well he's willing to throw like who. Oh man, and his love of his life is named Dorlinger.
Yes.
Is that historical? Because that is terrible too.
No, it's absurd. It seems made up. It seems like something they just put in as a placeholder.
Dorlinger, like.
But there's a.
Why?
You mentioned earlier.
Why. So much why.
The scene where Dracula
Dracula
comes down to visit the town council in what looks like, yet another set that they've built, and this looks like I don't know, like the back room at a Starbucks or something. But he goes in and he kills the whole. But this scene where he kills the whole town council is probably the only scene where the movie kind of comes alive with a crazy sort of energy and a vision for what the picture's about. And it's also the only scene that, to my knowledge, has no antecedent I can think of in another Dracula movie. So what that might mean is, if these guys had just said, you know what, fuck it, this is a Dracula movie, we're going to make whatever kind of Dracula movie we want, we're not remaking Hammer's Dracula, we're not remaking Louis Jourdan, we're just going to do something, that would have been a better picture probably. If this, or maybe I'm just sort of grasping at straws, but it just seems as though this is the one place where they sort of seem to stand up and notice that they're actually filming a movie.
Yeah.
No argument there.
No, it's your
so
point.
bad. Like the deaths are bad. The people.
Oh yeah, the sets. Okay,
like,
yeah. You've got.
All of it.
There are no. Remember how we said earlier that they would film these movies? Argento would get out in the streets of Rome, and Bava would go rent a castle in Spain and film all around the castle, and those movies had terrible scripts, terrible, but there was just some kind of an energy to them.
Guy, the saturation again, I have no idea. Usually you would dial down the saturation so you can kind of make things blend in.
It must have something to do with 3D.
No, that's what I'm saying. You don't have to do that. It's like somebody punked Argento and said, "Oh, well, if you're going to do 3D, it means up the saturation."
Well, and it's not as though these are new.
The guy who's in that scene, who's bald, he's so red and sunburnt. He looks like Sinestro from Green Lantern. They've upped the saturation so much. He looks like a cartoon character.
No, I agree. Maybe we just got bad prints, but
I kept wondering if they were trying to replicate the look of a Hammer movie, and maybe that was why. But Hammer movies really don't look like that.
No,
so I
think like that unless you are terrible at making anything. You would never There's Kincaid paintings that are less colorful than this. You don't take the slider for that, and Candyland, Angry Birds. Anything you name doesn't look as saturated, as oversaturated and terrible as this.
Well, and so Tony explain this, though. So Drew's right. If you look at, Hammer Dracula, Brides of Dracula, those things, so they have all that bright color, right? But to my eye, and I'm not as sophisticated as you, so I can't quite tell. To my eye, those look a lot better than this, and it looks to me like it's because of the texture of the film. The grain.
Well,
that's
this is digital, so anything you do like that is going to.
But it almost seems to me if they wanted to, they should introduce grain. Is what I'm saying.
Mel Brooks. And I'm not saying this is the greatest movie ever, but Mel Brooks did his Dracula parody in the 90s, and he tried to replicate the color palette of the Hammer movies, and he did it successfully. It actually kind of looks like a Hammer movie. This just does not. And I may be burned alive by other horror fans for saying this, but maybe Mel Brooks is just a better director.
Well, Mel Brooks can be
better
a good director.
directing this. again, I don't know. Like that's the travesty. Is Argento makes things, and even like a lot of his films have there's bright stuff.
Oh, Suspiria has crazy color.
But there's a contrast that happens. Even in
Yeah.
Suspiria, when there's a bright color or there's splashes of color, some of that is extremely vibrant. But there's a contrast. This is like everything is Candyland.
Yeah.
And you got to know that somebody did that on purpose. And I still do not like. Was he going for dreamlike? Has he?
Well, and it feels
like
remarkably shallow as far as depth of field goes.
No, but
except
that's
for a few
why.
cases
Like when you oversaturate, you lose depth.
Right.
Like you take up the contrast. Like take anything in Photoshop, up the contrast, up the saturation. It looks like this. It looks terrible. It's so funny that you would add 3D and remove the depth that way. Like it goes against like just even though it's so dull, it felt like 8 hours of my life, and I wanted.
Well, I mean, I think about
also
movies.
Like look at everything in it and go, what happened? Like how did this all come about? When my friends came in from festivals and said that was one of the most terrible things I've ever seen, I was like, but it's Argento. How can it be that terrible? And I saw it and go, wow, that it is.
Well, I really do feel like, going back to what we were saying earlier, I really do feel like Argento's name elevates your expectations. Because, like I said, if this was just a TV movie, I'd watch it and go, that was bad and really boring, and I would never think about it again. But, like, I'm actually walk away from this feeling kind of offended at how bad it is.
It's funny, when you mention the idea of a TV movie Dracula, setting aside that there's an NBC series of Dracula right now, which I don't watch because I'm not interested, but I just sort of, maybe next year I'll find out it was good and I'll just watch the whole first season at a go.
That's kind of how we do everything. We wait until we find out if everybody likes
do that, because I've heard good things about it.
This reminds me of a TV movie version of Dracula that would have been made like while Little House on the Prairie was on the air. You know, I mean, it really has, to me, it looks like that. It doesn't look like the stuff that Argento was making at the same time over in Italy, you know, which, again, had a grungy, trashy feel.
Oh, here's a question I have. Speaking of making Italy, why make, okay, so so it takes place in Transylvania. You have all these people with all these different accents.
Yeah, that's
and, like,
true.
what's the point of, and then you've got Rutger Hauer, who's actually, is playing a Dutch character, and he's actually from that part of the world. But anyway, but everybody else, it's like the craziest accents. I'm just like, why not have it be just have them act in Italian and then dub it or subtitle or something.
Well,
rather than having all these different
like they were dubbed.
Huh?
Some of the people did seem like they were dubbed. I could be wrong.
Some of them
they
were.
looked like dubbed.
Well, if they were dubbed, they were speaking English.
But this is how the Italian New Wave used to be done, which is that they would film what they called MOS, which God knows what that stood for, but people joke that it stood for Without Sound. But they would just film the whole movie silent. You know, you would have no soundtrack, no mics on the stage at all, and you would dub the whole thing afterwards so that you could hit different international markets. Mm-hmm. And you'd also add in all the Foley work and stuff like that. And all that's gone by the wayside now, I suppose, because of, you know, it's just much cheaper to film now than it was then. But, you know, this is going to sound, if Argento was standing here, he would probably say, you know, you are all insane. But I kind of feel like that also contributed to the grunginess and weirdness and awesomeness of those movies, is that you could tell that everything was cobbled together. There was, you know, the people weren't really speaking English or anything in particular.
I wonder also, and again, I am not, you know, by no means to me is Argento sacrosanct, even though I love a lot of his movies. I wonder if digital was just one of those things where, I don't know, maybe he's done a bunch more digital, but I wonder if digital was just one of those things where he's like, well, fine, if we're going to do it digital, it's all digital.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the plunge.
Yeah, and that may well be, but you could use digital to do what they do to every Hollywood movie and add a blue wash to this.
You can, I mean, come on,
you know.
Like, sci-fi movies are better than this. And
yeah,
even
no, I
the
mean,
worst
it's true.
sci-fi
There's
movie is still better than this, and that hurts me to say. But I would rather watch a Sharknado or
Absolutely.
Sharknado actually has personality. Like, I don't feel like this had much personality.
That's what again. It's that's one of the things that makes me feel weird. Is like I keep feeling that this script needs like at least one more draft to try to give it some flair.
Yeah, well, it's also like when they just do things like, what's her face gets turned into a vampire, and immediately the next day she's sitting at the table wearing black.
Right.
And
right.
nobody ever says "Are you in mourning?" She's just like, "No, I'm feeling drained. I'm gonna wear black today." Nobody pays attention, but it's the worst. Telegraphing.
No, absolutely.
Oh,
by the way,
so
Asia Argento is one of there's really only 3 women in this movie, and Asia Argento is one of them. She plays Lucy, who's kind of the heroine character, she's friends with Mina and friends with Harker, and she's nude a fair amount, which is always strange that Dario Argento seems to find an excuse to film his daughter Aja naked in every movie that they make, which is a lot of movies. And I've never
That's weird.
I've never tried. I mean, I don't know if it's weird or if it's. I mean, it would be weird for an American.
I mean, it's Europe, so
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Rare Exports has a bunch of old guys naked.
Yes.
And when asked why, they said because it's Europe. I don't know what's wrong with it.
Well, I think in Rare Exports they're expecting you to think that's weird, whereas here it's like, oh, this director. I don't know. There's something kind of suspect about Dario Argento filming his daughter naked this many times.
Over and over and over again. I mean, this isn't. It's not that this is the first movie they've made together where she's naked. And I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. I will say that I've never heard. I don't know, but I've never heard anything negative about Argento on a personal basis. Anything. This isn't Klaus Kinski where people say, "Oh, that guy's a monster. He's crazy. He does all sorts of crazy things." I've never heard that stuff about Argento.
I'm sure there's some of it somewhere, but who knows? I mean, maybe he's just a really nice guy. Also disappointing. The last song is Simonetti, who's in Goblin, does this kind of cheesy pop tune, but in general, just the effects and the production and everything, you're like,
well, the music
you made
to me,
Goblin, you were in Goblin,
music is
you
horrible.
made this.
The music to me, I worked at a haunted house for a while, and the music and the score in this reminds me of the Scary Sounds CD that they would play in the haunted house.
Well, and okay, this is Tarantino goes and gets really cheap needle drops from exploitation flicks. I'll bet you that Bruno Nicolai's score for Dracula in 1870 is probably available, and would have at least lent a weird, or you could have ripped it off and made something like it. This is a weird, random score that feels like he just paid $25 to one of those needle drop websites.
Everything feels like he paid booze and catering to everyone involved. Rutger Hauer, he's like.
Can we talk about Rutger Hauer for a second?
It looks like. I don't.
Oh, but before we hit on Rutger Hauer, just to stay with this cheapness question, the movie opens trying to up your confidence with first opening credits that say Dracula 3D or whatever the heck it calls it, and it's written in this weird red Dracula font that's borrowed from Francis Ford Coppola, just on black screen. So it's like this super cheap, QuickTime opening credits, followed by an extraordinarily bad fly-through of, I don't know, a random village, maybe a half-built level of Call of Duty. I don't know what this is, but it's just so strange. And I don't know. I think there's a million. The whole thing should have been cut. We should have just cut straight to whatever it is.
No, just cut. Period. Just cut the movie.
Again, if I could stab it through the heart. I would.
Okay, well, let's get to what Drew wanted to talk about, which is something that is really good, is that you're making a movie. You're making a movie called Dracula. You're going to premiere it at Cannes. People on the French Riviera are going to choose your movie over the sands of Cannes, and you're going to show it, and you're going to tell them Van Helsing, for once, is going to be played by the one and only Roy Batty, I don't know. Rutger Hauer, and so what do we get, Drew? How did Rutger do?
This has to be the most disappointing thing about this movie more than anything else, because I feel like Rutger Hauer, out of all living actors, is probably should have been the most awesome Van Helsing in recent, if not all-time, movie history. Like, on paper, that is amazing casting. And the character is barely in the movie. He feels like he's in it for 5 seconds.
Yeah,
and then he shows up, and it just sort of seems like Rutger Hauer is like walking through, like somebody gave Rutger Hauer a lot of Valium before he had to deliver his line.
I think what happened, Drew, is that Rutger Hauer watched the movie before he was in the movie.
He went forward in time. He busted.
He read the script.
If anything could have elevated this movie and like kept it from being a snooze fest, it's like Rutger Hauer had shown up at the last second and been like a badass Van Helsing. It could have saved this movie.
They do make him a badass as far as like he takes out all the vampires. Like, I mean,
he kills one vampire in like 8 seconds.
He's cutting throats and he's doing stuff. But everything about there's no danger. There's no danger to what he like. They make him a badass because he dispatches all the vampires. But there's
nothing about Rutger Hauer that makes him. Yeah, he doesn't seem like a badass. Like, the stuff he does is badass. He doesn't do anything to sell that. And I know Rutger Hauer is actually capable of putting in a good performance. He just didn't care.
No, I mean, this is where I blame the director, truly. And there's a million places in this movie where, in the fight scene with Rutger Hauer, or when Harker is walking by a window and somebody grabs him through the window, where the director is so lazy that he just telegraphs the whole thing in advance. There's never a moment ever in this entire movie where you're like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next. You know, that never happens. It's always instead more like, hey, guess what we're about to do now, and then they do it, and then
that goes back to like she girls been at the table last night. She was fine. Now she's in at a funeral. Like, all of a sudden, nobody's like, wow, when did you become goth? Oh, I've been feeling kind of bad. The flu makes you dress like you're at a funeral.
Go ahead, Drew. What is it? I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just want to rant about Rutger Hauer.
No, go rant. Go crazy.
Rutger Hauer is what made me want, more than Dario Argento, Rutger Hauer playing Van Helsing is what made me want to see this movie. You know, I thought we were going to finally get something that was going to be up to the level of, you know, if not Peter Cushing, at least Anthony Hopkins. You know, at least to where it would have been entertainingly scenery chewing. And, you know, the annals of screen Van Helsing, he's not even as good as Peter Fonda.
I liked Peter Fonda.
Peter Fonda's a great Van Helsing.
I was trying to think of cheap movies, way cheaper than this film, that are really interesting and enjoyable to watch from beginning to end. And Nadja, starring Peter Fonda and costing almost nothing other than the cost of filming Peter Fonda walking around like San Francisco, where the hell they are.
The whole time I saw, Rutger Hauer's, I mean, he's been in some bad movies, but he's generally pretty awesome just being Rutger Hauer. The whole time I was like, wow, I just wish I was watching Nadja the Vampire, like Van Helsing, instead of this guy. Like,
we should do Nadja at some point, because that's an interesting oddity of 90s horror. In fact, you should find out if that's on Netflix. But
we'll find out. If I were to see Rutger Hauer tomorrow, I would tell him how annoyed. Like, I don't care what his reaction was. I would tell him how annoyed.
I got free frequent flyer miles, and I just drank the whole time. And I needed rent that month, and my kid, need to go to college. He needed books or whatever.
And I would slap him and his aged to perfection face. Like, I would just slap him, because I just.
I was there whenever. Who was it? Udo Kier, when they asked him, why'd you do Johnny Mnemonic, and he said, sometimes you do movies for art, sometimes you do movies for a paycheck, you know?
Yes.
And this was definitely for a paycheck. Although it can't have been more
Johnny
than
Mnemonic. Johnny Mnemonic is better than this movie.
I
yeah.
never thought I would admit that, but it's true, definitely.
And
Like,
Johnny Mnemonic has an awesome pinball game, which this movie does not have.
So many movies have. I mean, I would watch any Full Moon Entertainment movie, and I like a lot of Full Moon Entertainment movies. But in general, you know, they were kind of done on the cheap. We can admit that.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
would watch any Full Moon Entertainment movie you can name.
Well, look, one secret to all of those, and this is an important thing. One secret that all those movies know is that you follow a formula to at least have a vaguely watchable story from beginning to end. I know this is going to sound terrible, but you need to have all of your characters introduced in the first, 20 minutes of a 2-hour film, and you need to constantly be going from one major plot point to the next, and it needs to follow a path so you feel that you have forward momentum, and then you have to feel like you're moving into the third act. This movie doesn't feel like anything. So all of those cheap films like you're talking about, the Full Moon stuff, at least all of those are really formulaic, and you really know, and so
the reason why we rented them was because we knew we were getting. Like,
right,
I genuinely like that 80s horror.
Oh,
like,
man,
I genuinely love those movies.
Subspecies? I love me some Subspecies. I love me some Puppet Master.
Exactly. But all those movies, despite the fact that some people can look down their nose at them as for, they're cheap, they're done. Like, there is more craft in those movies by far.
Yes.
The cheapest of them. And the most you know what, we better do a Puppet Master 20.
Yeah.
The least of them is infinitely better than this movie.
But why? Why, Tony? I disagree with that. I mean, I don't know those movies, but I just don't think. I think this is just not a good movie. But I don't think that those Puppet Master movies that seem horrible. So I've never seen any of them.
No, once you watched it, you would. I mean, I can't.
They're just formulaic adventures, and they follow the same path.
I think there's something. I think there's something intangible. Like I said, I think there's something intangible about being something that's so bad it's good. It's like the very first episode we did of the show was Van Helsing, and that's a terrible movie. But I will watch that anytime that is on TV because it's goofy.
Yeah.
And this movie doesn't have any goofy charm.
It's not boring the way this movie is. That's
for sure.
I
mean, with the way that it's presented, the color palette, etc. They obviously made choices. Like, it's so passionless. It feels passionless.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I liken it to having everyone loses a bet. Like, I bet you can't make something. Well, I can make something. I can make Dracula. Okay, and then he made Dracula. Like, see, I made a Dracula for $2. And everybody went, okay, well, you made a Dracula for $2. That was great. I guess you won. And no, we all lost.
That's the thing. It is kind of passionless is probably hitting the nail on the head. And Dracula, if nothing else, is a character that should have passion.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, when I think about Coppola, and I didn't like the Coppola Dracula at all, but that movie was just full of constant heavy breathing. I mean, it had a romantic angle. All the actors were overacting in the best ways. Every scene, he was doing something interesting with how he was going to film it, because he knew, like, hey, we've done this scene where they go over to Carfax Abbey and challenge Dracula 1,000 times, so how are we going to do it differently this time? And
what's funny about passionless is even the scenes between lovers that are supposed to have passion have zero passion.
Have zero passion? Absolutely.
Wow, and how do you do that? Like, I was constantly amazed when people, like, I'll see movies, and this has happened multiple times at Weird Wednesdays, when you see a movie that is supposed to be something, have passion, supposed to be erotic, and you watch it and you go, whoa, how did you took a thing I usually like and you made me really not like it, really really hate
mentioning
it.
something Weird Wednesdays, you're reminding me that there are movies that I hated much more than this. I think The Sinful Dwarf is a way worse movie than this.
But it's kind of, even that, like, I can't say I would watch The Sinful Dwarf over this.
Yeah.
I would watch The Sinful Dwarf the first time over this.
Yeah.
Just because, like, it did crazy things. This does nothing new. It does nothing better, and it certainly does a lot of things worse. The CG, again, like, look, I've made bad CG, like, in my life. I worked as an animator. I can't, I've made stuff I look back on and go, oof, that was terrible. But I never wanted to be in a movie, much less an Argento movie. Like, I wouldn't, like,
you would cut it.
Like, in turn, it feels like either it didn't get finished or, and again, no.
Yeah.
Somebody
That's
felt
really
like this was good enough, or somebody felt like, like the scene where Dracula's decaying and he's got, like, the holes in him and stuff. We far surpassed that level of CG, like,
right,
like a decade or two ago. Like, there's not a good reason, like I said, other than, like, you went to a really, you paid students to just, like,
but here's what you do when that happens, Tony. There's precedent for that. Look, Spielberg got stuck with a bad shark. All right, he paid a lot of money for a shark, and he had a shark, but it didn't work. It didn't look good if you kept the camera on it very long, and so he filmed it, and in the end, he decided, what am I going to do? I'm actually going to film it a lot less, and I'm going to cut more and more footage out of it. And by the time I'm done, you're not going to see the shark very much. And that was basically a function of the shark did not work very well. And Argento could have done the same thing here. He could have said, hey, this scene where Dracula turns into a wolf just looks awful. It looks very bad. And I'm going to just cut away. I'm just going to have the actor react to something we don't see. But
not only did he keep that, he has this, like, weird twist ending with, again, some of the most terrible CG I've seen, where he just shows it. He just keeps showing it at the very end, like the smoke and, like, the wolf thing, and you're like, you just, you kept all of it, like,
right.
Why did you keep all of that? Why did you have somebody make that, and then why did you keep it? It's just, wow. I just don't even know, like.
I should also mention the townspeople. This is the supposed town that this movie is taking place in. Again, Jonathan Harker, who we should mention here. Jonathan Harker has come to town to work on Dracula's library. That's a bit that's
And by the way, I was calling him Keanu the whole time.
So the gentleman who plays Jonathan Harker here, who's normally a real estate agent, but in some movies he's a librarian. And in this one he's a librarian, so he comes to work on Dracula's library. Harker is dressed, he's wearing the costume, literally, he appears to be in costume as Keanu Reeves in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. Right down to the wig and
the wig.
And the suits and the weirdest like European California dude accents. It's the strangest. Sometimes I felt like I was watching one of those skits that Andy Samberg used to do on SNL, where it was supposedly movies about gangsters in the United States made by like Norwegians or something. And so they would be like detectives interviewing somebody going, listen, I'm from the mean streets of Times Square. It was so strange. This guy, and by the way, he's not a very good actor. Or if he is a good actor, he's not at home speaking English, and he has literally no idea what he's saying at any given moment.
Well, again, if he's not directed to act worth a damn,
No, I agree. It would be very sad to me to find out if Unox Ugalde, who is this guy, he's Spanish. It would be interesting to find out that he's actually a genius actor, and he's fantastic, and he's doing all these crazy things. It just so happens he literally had no idea what the hell he was supposed to do in this movie.
I can't. Again, it just felt like the whole thing going. Was everybody just kind of drunk? Were they doing it for? Did they have like a booze sponsorship and everybody was just?
I know what it is. I mean, you've been to like. Surely you've been in skits and community theater and stuff where there are some actors who just literally have no idea what the hell a line means. I think that's what's going on here. I think Unox Ugalde Gutierrez literally has no idea what he's saying. It's possible that these lines are just phonetic. I have no idea.
Well, again, you can watch. There's a point where it is actually up to the director. The new Star Wars trilogy, has tons of actors and actresses who have won multiple awards in their careers, and yet got what he got.
Suddenly Samuel L. Jackson sounds like he's not really sure how English works,
Yeah.
Like, I'm saying these words, I'm not sure what they mean,
and you
really,
get to that point
honest,
when you have people who are good, and you've seen them be good, you go, I think I know where, I think I know where the blame lies, and I think a lot of that's here too, like.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I should mention this movie kept making me think of El Conde Dracula. The 1970 Spanish-Italian Dracula that starred Christopher Lee, and by Jess Franco, and it's one of the few Jess Franco movies I can think of that makes an attempt at being like indoor stuff. I mean, it's got no nudity. It's very lightweight on the gore, but in retrospect, it's a wonderful take on Dracula. It's still kind of dull, but it's way more interesting than this is here. I don't know. We should probably go to our final thoughts, because we could go all night, but all we're really going to accomplish is thinking about more things that we don't like about Argento's Dracula. And I think we've talked about the plotting, we talked about the sets, we talked about the music, we talked about the CG, we talked about the performances. We talked about how Dracula acquits himself well, although I don't like that he has a banker's cut. It's like Sam Neill playing Dracula, which I guess would be okay. And so that brings us around to final thoughts. Should people out there watch Dracula, or should they find something else to do with their time? And you're welcome to recommend something. And then this is the beginning of our Netflix tour, where we're going to be doing nothing but Netflix movies for a few weeks and see how that goes. So let's go. Let's mix it up. Let's go backwards. Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go. So Julia, final thoughts. Argento's Dracula.
Boring, for sure boring, really, really, really boring. And I think really gory, even though Drew and I disagree on that. One of our few disagreements on this episode is that I thought it was just way too gory with all the animal effects and all the slashing of throats and all that garbage. So for me, none of the things I like in these movies were present, except for I think Dracula is really attractive, the guy who plays Dracula. But other than that, I did not care for anything really about it.
Drew, final thoughts?
Well, I mean, the general question they ask is, should somebody take the time to watch this? And my answer is a resounding no. I mean, especially on Netflix, there's a gazillion things you could watch. I watched after seeing this movie, I immediately watched Lair of the White Worm, which is a much more entertaining take on Bram Stoker than this is. There's Reanimator is up there right now. Which is can't be good in all the right ways. This is just a dull, tedious movie, and I just don't waste your time. If you really feel like you need to watch Argento, go back to the movies of his that are well regarded. It'll be a much more judicious use of your time.
Tony, anything that you can add to that?
No. Well, for example, like if you're going to watch cheese and like nudity, I just watched like Dracula's Widow the other day, which is not a great movie. I watched it just because I was like, well,
so
let me find something
right?
that people, it's not super. It's a known quantity. Like it feels like movies I would rent on a weekend, because I used to rent a bunch of horror movies, a stack of them every weekend on VHS, and it feels like that, and that's good. Like this brings nothing new. It feels super cheap. I've seen any number of student projects and fan films that are better. I mean, you could find shame of it.
Yeah.
And again, like the CG is especially egregious. Like I'm not saying I could do better, but I think I could figure out a way to do better. Or I know people who could do better, like instantly. There's no reason. I personally know people who in the film industry that I went to school with. Some of them worked on like Lord of the Rings and Alien, Prometheus, like stuff like that. Like I've seen their work, and I go, why this? And it's just, it feels like the cheapest of cheap. It's cheap in a way that it shouldn't be that cheap because we've gone so far from what it costs, to make us something. Again, I go back to like I look at like the one that really solidified it for me was Faust, the silent movie. Mm-hmm. And you look at that and you go, holy cow. Now, that was the blockbuster. That was the multi-million-dollar movie of its day, right?
Yeah.
But you look at that and you go, how do we make bad movies? Like, this was done in an era where this was, some of these effects just must have seemed impossible, Yeah. And yet, we make this from a director who's normally well-regarded, who's made some movies that I love, And you get this. I just don't even get it. And it made me really mad that I had to watch it too. Like as I clicked down the minutes, I was just mad. Whoever suggested this, we have an outside the podcast discussion we need to have. Because I wanted my time back. I wanted somebody to pay me. If I thought that he'd spent more than $2, I would want him to mail me a check for my time.
I did not want my time back. I mean, I've felt that way about movies that I thought were really morally revolting, or that I didn't want something to be a part of my memory. This is not like that. This more was just, I was just agog at how dull this was. This is like, being forced.
I could have downloaded something like a piece of software and watched the bar move forward. And that would have been more interesting. That would have been a better use of my time because at the end I would have gotten like software I can use.
And when it comes to movies,
this I just
when it comes to movies,
by anger.
Stuff that's on Netflix. You mentioned Dracula's Widow is on there. I don't know why we're picking on Netflix, but since we all are Netflix subscribers, we're going to be challenging one another with Netflix movies. And I'm curious, by the way, if Dracula's Widow is going to be your choice, Tony.
No, it's fun. I mean, it's.
it's Sylvia Crystal. That's got to stand for something.
Yeah, well, that's part of the charm. I mean, if you're going to watch something that cheesy, or again, it's a known quantity. The things I liked about those movies, I was pretty sure I was going to get in that movie, and it's fun. I would, but it's not. In fact, there's a bunch of movies that I was kind of like, But then there's also some stuff where I'm like, I'm not going to subject everybody to this, which is again why I would be mad whoever suggested this movie.
I came just this close to recommending Female Vampire, which is a Eurotrash.
Oh, I like that movie, but
it's a really good movie. But there's no way in heck I would force all four of us to spend an hour or possibly more discussing Female Vampire at length because it's such trash. I mean, it's such pure. Those guys must have been laughing constantly while they were making that movie because all the actors act with such great depth, and they're essentially discussing a vampire woman who walks around wearing nothing but a cape and a belt. That's
awesome. But again, Jason, there's somebody was trying to do something, trying to do something artsy, trying to that's what makes it where we can go, man, it's kind of not super great in the way that you would think of other movies, but it's got something about it that we enjoy. You know what I mean?
There's a joie de vivre about Female Vampire.
There, right. But this has just none of any of that. There's no artistry to it either.
No, it reminds me. You remember how we were talking about TV movies And so I was thinking, I always really liked the TV remake of Inherit the Wind. It stars Jason Robards and Kirk Douglas, because I think Jason Robards and Kirk Douglas are really good, and they are really good. And I think it should be fine for you to remake movies all the time in the same way that different theaters put on Hamlet, and I'm good with that. Having said that, the remake of Inherit the Wind has two fantastic performances, but the movie itself looks really bland. This is like that, except for it doesn't even really have the amazing performances. But it does have that feel of a Sunday night movie of the week circa 1986, on network TV in America. And then there's been some gore and nudity thrown in. Just very strange.
And I think, to answer Julia's question, I think the reason we think of it as not gory is the fact that the gore is so awfully CG that it ceases to become the gore that we know. Right. And I can totally agree with you that it is gross. Like, there's lots of blood. That there's the top of that guy's head blows off, and I'm air quoting that because it's just a terrible effect in general. But the guy's eyeball gets stabbed out, but it's such a terrible eyeball. Like for gorehounds, like, it doesn't even become
Henry
gore.
Portrait of a Serial Killer had an eyeball, and that was a much cheaper movie than this, and it was a way better eyeball than
That's
Cannibal Ferox couldn't have cost 1/10 of what this movie cost, and yet has just unbelievable kinds of violence. And by the way, that's not my scene. I don't really care for overly gory pictures, but this.
But I think that's why, like, I can understand where Julia would go, oh man, this is really gross and gory, but the rest of us are like, that looks awful.
Like you've seen Cannibal Holocaust? No.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man.
It's unconvincing. It's to the point of being cartoony.
So we can think of literally nothing that would cause us to recommend that somebody would see.
No, I want it.
I could. No.
From Hell's Heart, I stab at thee.
Dario
Argento.
Let's do recommendations so I can talk about stuff that we actually like.
But let me just mention really quickly that I am interested in watching Dario Argento's Phantom of the Opera because, I've heard things. It may be good. So we'll see how that works. This is which means that my life is essentially one giant sitcom, and every episode ends the way it begins. But okay, endorsements. Let's go. I don't know. We'll start with Tony. Tony, do you have anything to endorse this week? The things that people need to be looking for.
I guess it's all over the place. Immediately after this, for my birthday, I got another Shaw Brothers. I recommend Shaw Brothers movies. They deliver on what's awesome. And in particular, last night I watched one called Holy Flame of the Martial World. It is bright, colorful, and completely insane. If you look at the trailer, look up Holy Flame of the Martial World, and it comes in this pretty cheap 4-pack of Shaw Brothers Collection 2, which I recommend Shaw Brothers Collection 1 as well. And wow, it's so crazy and cheesy and fun. It looks cheap in an awesome way. Again, it was so funny to watch that after this, because it's done on the cheap. But man, people are flying, and there's kung fu lasers, and there's insanity. And man, I really, really, that was my jam last night. It was the antithesis to the lack of enjoyment I had watching Argento's Dracula. It was Holy Flame of the Martial World, and in general, there's even, I also got a Wu-Tang collection of 25 movies, the Iron Fist collection on Blu-ray, and they look, the transfer's not great, but man, there's gems in that, and I'll take those. I'll take any of those grainy pan and scan, fun things over this drudgery.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're a kung fu fan, Holy Flame of the Martial World is just completely wackadoo nuts, and it's better for that.
Outstanding. Tony, Drew, do you have any endorsements?
Well, since we are doing kind of a Netflix-centric series, I enjoyed a documentary I found on Netflix called The Sci-Fi Boys, and it's mostly about Forey Ackerman and Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine and sort of the culture of science fiction and horror fans that sort of grew up around it. And I think if you're interested in sort of how nerd culture as it exists today sort of came to be, this would be a fun thing for you to view. I've also really, really, really been enjoying going back and watching all the Batman Brave and the Bold episodes. It actually takes me back to the early parts of my relationship with my wife when she was still in New York and I was here, and I would stay up very late talking on the phone with her. And normally when she would kind of finally pass out, I would go on YouTube and I would watch these episodes of this crazy Batman cartoon from a couple of years ago, which was very much patterned after kind of a cross between a Silver Age comic book and the old Adam West Batman, but in the most awesome way possible. And I know, like a lot of hardcore Batman fans, they only want to see Batman, one way, which is sort of jet black and very serious. But I think I would think you would have to be pretty closed-minded not to be completely charmed by this show.
It is a charming show. Batman Brave and the Bold is very funny and very clever. It is,
and beautifully animated.
Yeah, no, it's delightful. And I know that if you're explaining, you're losing, but if you have any familiarity at all with Bill Finger art on Batman from the whatever Golden Age period that was, whatever part of the Golden Age that was, then you'll recognize the look of Batman.
Also a lot of Dick Sprang and Jack Cole and a lot of Jack Kirby in the design sense. But great little superhero show. I have to personally recommend, I would not be doing my job coming up during South by Southwest on March 10th. I have Punk versus Rockabilly 4, which now makes me realize I've been doing this for 4 years. There is no cover this year. It is ages 18 and up this year. The doors are at 7, and that is 6 bands for free. We have Baseline Bums, The Octanes, Violent Night, my wife's band Danger Cakes, the Sound Mind, which is a local pop punk band, and a new band, but with a lot of really great local awesome musicians in it, called the High School Cruisers. So this is I do a lot of shows every year. This is always my favorite show. It always ends up being so much fun. Tony's old band Bakari Shred played it last year, and he can attest it's a good time.
Oh, it was awesome. That was a great show. I wish that band was kind of lightning in a bottle, and I do miss it in a lot of ways. But that show in particular for us was really great and really great fun. It is a really, really good time. So I can't say enough good things about those shows, because they are really just fun. Just go out, have fun, watch everything a fun music show should be is that show. So.
Well, I appreciate. I'm actually blushing right now, Tony.
Well, I only speak the truth, or at least the truth as I see it.
True. No, you only speak the truth. Just watch. We'll figure some stuff out. All right. So, Julia, did you have anything to endorse this week?
Nothing horror related, but I always try to watch all the Oscar-nominated movies, and so I just watched Nebraska, which is just the greatest picture. I loved it so much, and it does deserve to be called The Picture, Adam, wherever you are. Bruce Stern, Will Forte, Bob Odenkirk, who's from Breaking Bad, and Stacy Keach. But it's just such a neat. It's so authentic. It just felt like it's everything that the movie that we've been reviewing is absolutely not. It just feels like people being real people, and just a picture of what real life is like out there in the world. So I just thought thought that was a neat movie.
It is delightful. I was going to recommend Rome Italian Style, which was an amazing SCTV skit from SCTV, which is a brilliant Saturday Night Live-like show back in the 80s and 70s. And they did this thing in 1982 called Rome Italian Style, which was an extended film skit starring Eugene Levy and John Candy that attempted to reproduce the feel of a bad Italian Eurotrash movie, complete with bad dubbing, weird women throwing themselves at the main character. It was so funny, and it's been taken off of YouTube, so I can't recommend that. But if you can find it, then you can recommend it back to me and let us know on the Facebook page. So instead, what I'll recommend is if you're not easily shocked and you're looking for something really strange, Female Vampire is streaming on Netflix. But also, Steven Soderbergh just announced, and I have yet to see where to find it, but you can find the trailer all over online. Steven Soderbergh has released a feature-length Psychos. It's a picture called Psychos, where he has edited together the original Hitchcock Psycho and also the Gus Van Sant remake of Psycho into one piece that studies the differences between them. And you can see the shower scene is being disseminated all over the web, and it's really good. And I can't wait to see the rest of this. And also, Portlandia comes back this week, so that also promises to be fantastic. I have so enjoyed talking about this movie that none of us like. And it's going to get even better, because over the next 4 weeks, we are going to dig deep into Netflix, and each of us is going to choose a movie available on Netflix that the other three must suffer through. And I can't wait.
I'm still so angry that we came to this after Negative Happy Chainsaw Edge is off of Netflix. I'm so mad and disappointed.
Well, we don't have to.
Whatever you just said, I'm really glad that happened, because that sounds like a horrible movie.
No, it's awesome.
Tony, if you want to watch Negative Happy Chainsaw Edge, we can probably.
It's hard to
there's no way we can do that. Anything with chainsaw in the title, I am vetoing.
That's BS. That's total BS, Julia. Like, again, it has.
You know what?
It's a movie.
Jamie likes the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You might be surprised that you like it.
I've seen it. I don't like it.
No. Negative Happy Chainsaw Edge has nothing to do with any of that. As far as it actually has a love story. Like I said, it's one of the movies like I actually was recommended. I think I said it many times that I wish everybody would check it out, and now it's off at the point in time when I wanted to get everybody to watch it.
Well, I am firm like the Rock of Gibraltar with my choice of Troll Hunter.
Yep. I'm still trying to figure out mine.
So we'll be announcing what exact movies. I think my choice. I've been so torn because there's so many great things to watch. Creepshow 2 is available. Amityville 3, which also was a 3D movie. I really thought about doing that one, but I don't think that's where I'm going to land.
Mine is a Johnny Depp picture, because it's Johnny Depp.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember. I finally chose what my movie is going to be earlier today, and now I've forgotten whatever I said it was.
That's not a good sign, Jason.
Well, no, I keep going back and forth. Because I really wanted to force everybody to watch something really strange, but we've already done that this week with Dracula 3D. So, I know what I chose: Children of the Corn. Yeah, because that's just so much wonder. It's 80s, and it's Stephen King, and it's got a crazy kid actor, and it's got people lost in corn. So that'll be good. So yeah. Anyway. We have a Facebook page, Castle of Horror Podcast. Just look for us on Facebook, and let us know what you think. Like us on Facebook. Leave us a review on iTunes. Argue with us. We are now hosted also on Bleeding Cool, and we totally want to hear from you there. So this is just
that is awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Bleeding Cool. We're really glad you guys are here. I see lots more people coming every week, and it's fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody, and we will be back next week.
Ciao.
Later.
See ya.